Hey, what is going on, guys? And welcome back to another episode of Star Wars Galaxy of Heroes. And if you guys thought that Emperor Palpatine and Darth Vader reworks were the only things we were getting for the month of February, well, guess what? We got a lot more dark side content heading our way, with today's latest announcement being the Sith Marauder. It looks like Capital Games is shooting for the gold and trying to outdo what they did last February of 2017, which was the biggest addition for the dark side back then, and the Sith Marauder is a very interesting addition to the game. In case you guys don't know, Sith Marauders were warriors that fought during the Great Sith War, and because of that fact, we're going to speculate towards the end on what this might be building up to, because as many of you guys know, in about 2 weeks, I'm going out to Sacramento to visit Capital Games so they can show me what the big releases for February. So stay tuned for my thoughts towards the end. But let's move on to talk about the Sith Marauders kit. Now, we have some gameplay provided by Capital Games. It's okay gameplay to give us a decent idea of how the Sith Marauder will operate, but do keep in mind this isn't perfect footage because we have a lot of clips going up against Gear 9 and Gear 10 characters, so just want to make sure you guys are well aware of that. So just as a quick summary, the Sith Marauder is an attacker that gets stronger with the more buffs and more debuffs spread across the battlefield between both yourself and the enemy unit, so a very dynamic character that keeps getting more powerful throughout the battle. And as we see with the basic called Strength Through Passion, it's an ability that's quite simple but does some decent stuff. It deals physical damage to the target enemy, some decent damage I should say, and inflicts offense down for 2 turns. So it's great to see a character that has a basic kit but still does some good work. It does decent damage on the basic, and offense down is one of the more superior debuffs in the game to reduce that oncoming damage, especially important when there's Commander Luke Skywalker, Han Solo, Jedi training raid teams where they put out big damage. Sith Marauder will help try to reduce the amount of damage your team is taking on. Furthermore, when there are debuffs being applied on the field, that fuels Sith Marauder, as we'll find out with their unique. But before we jump the gun on the unique, let's move on to the first and only special ability, known as Victory Through Power. Now, first of all, the animations on this ability is absolutely nuts. Probably one of my favorite animations in the game. We throw dual lightsabers at the enemy, and this does some pretty cool stuff, and it varies depending if you're going up against characters or going up against raid bosses. But let's take a look at what it says. This ability deals physical damage to a single target enemy and grants all allies potency up for 2 turns. And if this ability is used up against a character, this attack scores a critical hit and reduces the target's max health by 15% until the end of the encounter. And if you're using this up against a raid boss, this attack can ignore armor. So I already mentioned earlier, some of the clips we're seeing are up against Gear 9, Gear 10 characters, but there are some Gear 11 and Gear 12 enemies we're looking at. But overall, you see this ability do some pretty decent damage, over 20,000, sometimes over 30,000 damage. And keep in mind, this attack will get stronger and stronger over the course of the battle, depending on how many buffs and debuffs are on the field, as we'll find out with the unique. But the other significant thing is the fact that he's reducing the health of the enemy by 15%, and we have a lot of characters in the game that like to go under the protection and into the health of the enemy. So this might pair well with, for example, Sith Trooper. That might work well, or perhaps Savage Opress, or more recently, Emperor Palpatine's rework will reduce the health of Jedi and Rebels and enemies with shock by a big whopping 20% per each of those items. So this might pair very well with Emperor Palpatine too. And the fact that this ignores armor for raid bosses, and as we'll see with the unique, this character I can see be very useful for the Rancor and AAT raids. But let's now move on to that unique, which is called The Force Shall Free Me. Sith Marauder has plus 5% defense, plus 5% health steal, and plus 5% tenacity for each buff on all characters, not just your allies, all characters, which includes the enemies. Sith Marauder has plus 2% critical chance, plus 2% offense, and plus 2% potency for each debuff on all characters. And on top of all this, when an enemy uses an ability outside of their turn, Sith Marauder gains 20% turn meter. So as you see, a very dynamic character with this unique ability. But let's kind of break this off piece by piece because there's a lot to chew right here. First of all those buffs that are stacking on both your side as well as the enemies, they're pretty much increasing his defensive abilities, increasing the amount of defense, his tenacity so he can wave off debuffs, and increasing his survivability through the plus 5% health steal. So this might be a really important character to use up against those Jedi training raid teams, because imagine all of those buffs that BB-8 grants, or perhaps General Kenobi grants, and so on and so forth. He's going to increase his survivability quite a lot. This could potentially get to over plus 50% health steal, even farther beyond that if we stretch our imagination. But the thing that's going to stick out for most people is what happens happens when there's a lot of debuffs being applied in both the enemy as well as yourself. As you're seeing, the more debuffs that are on the field, the stronger this character is getting, with increasing its critical chance, but more importantly, increasing its offense. And this might work very well under a Darth Vader leadership that is Zeta'd out. As we know, Darth Vader's Zeta leadership already grants a big offense boost to both Sith and Empire allies, but the most important thing is those damage over time debuffs that Darth Vader is applying is never going away until he is finally defeated. So for each of those damage over times that are never expiring, it increases the Sith Marauder's offense. So let's say, for example, hypothetically, you're in a raid and there are 50 damage over times on the Rancor. Right there, he just increased his offense by plus 100%. Now, of course, we don't know what mods were used on these characters here, but even when there's not a lot of debuffs on the field, this character is still doing some pretty decent damage from an arena perspective. And here's a clip from the AAT raid. There are moments where this character is getting over 60,000 damage, so I can definitely see people trying to use this character for the AAT as well. Now, the last thing to sort of talk about from this ability is the 20% turn meter gain, and this is huge in the current state of arena because counterattacking is a very powerful mechanic. For each of those rebel enemies that are counterattacking under a Commander Luke Skywalker-led team, they are each fueling 20% turn meter. So hypothetically, if 5 rebels counterattack, that's 100% turn meter for the Sith Marauder and go in there and do some good damage. Or probably a more popular example is Jedi Training Ray. BB-8 can counterattack outside of his turn, but on top of that, Jedi Training Ray might call BB-8 to assist, and when BB-8 assists outside of his turn, that's 20% turn meter right there for the Sith Marauder. And if BB-8 has his Zeta on Roll of the Punches, he calls in another resistance ally to assist, and that resistance ally that is attacking outside their turn also grants 20% turn meter to the Sith Marauder. So this is a great soft counter to counter attacking. Not as good as Daze, but it makes sure that the Sith Marauder is attacking frequently by either applying offense down or putting some big damage out there or reducing the max health of these enemies. But that is pretty much the kit overview for the Sith Marauder, and I like the fact that it's a simple kit and it's deadly and it's very dynamic. So as the course of the battle progresses, whether it's arena, territory wars, or even territory battles or the raids, he's getting stronger over time, which makes this character viable in so many different aspects. Whether this character will be arena viable, it's hard to say right now because we just got the reworks for Emperor Palpatine and Darth Vader, and they haven't been even released to the game just yet, hopefully soon. But on paper, it seems like there's a lot of possibilities with Darth Vader, Emperor Palpatine, and Sith Marauder. But I think the Sith Marauder is more importantly meant to build up towards something a lot bigger coming later on this month. So put on your tinfoil hats. If you made it this far, let's get into some speculation. In case you didn't see it, a while ago I put out a video with news confirmed by Capital Games that Darth Revan was not the big release for this month, as rumors suggested, which means that Darth Revan could happen in the future. And on top of that, I also mentioned in the video that me and a couple other YouTubers and other game changers are being invited out to Sacramento to visit Capital Games to see what the big release is for the month of February. And in that video, I showed how the developers are teasing the public with the fact that they are trying to top what they did last year in February of 2017. And now with the release of the Sith Marauder, I think they are trying to go for something up that Darth Nihilus-ish alley, and I think Darth Malgus is what is coming up soon in Star Wars Galaxy of Heroes. Now, as I mentioned earlier, the Sith Marauder was one of those characters during the Great Sith War, or Great Galactic War for another way to coin the term, and Darth Malgus was known to have Sith Marauders behind him in battle. So this might be indicating that Darth Malgus is coming to the game because Darth Malgus was one of the individuals who propelled the Great Galactic War to occur, and Sith Marauders were units under his wing to help him win battles. I know it's a lot of speculation at this point, but hopefully we find out soon. The trip to Sacramento is in 2 weeks, and facts are starting to indicate Darth Malgus might be this month's big feature, and hopefully it's on Darth Nihilus' level that can really change the game and give Sith that edge that they've lost so much since R2-D2 came into the game. But as always, I love talking with you guys down below in the comments. So let me know what you think of the Sith Marauder. Is it a yay or a nay? Do you like this character? Do you think it has potential? And let me know about the speculation. Do you think the big feature for the month of February is going to be Darth Malgus, or something else on your mind? You guys let me know down below. If you did enjoy this video, be sure to hit that like button and subscribe so you're not missing a thing. And as always,